So Andy, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it, okay? What happens in Emmeline stays in Emmeline. And welcome to Going Home. I'm Craig Young, and we're going to be looking at people, families, ministries, churches, and seeing where God is moving through His people.
I took a team of teenagers into the Victoria Youth Custody Center, and alongside with other teenagers, I was a teenager, and we all went in and we volunteered there.
Why are you doing it?
It was just something that, to me, I loved people. I knew that God loved me, and He was that first love, and I responded to that love, and that our job is to take that love out. Yeah, so God's been the clapper probably because He's been protecting us through it.
Yeah.
More than anyone else, but couldn't have done it without an amazing wife, that's for sure.
So you're going to camps in your blood, you're loving it, you find Jesus and have a relationship with Him starting at camp.
Mm-hmm.
Where's my question now?
And we have a lot more care and focus and compassion and, the ethical side of evangelism, you could say, where we actually care for the whole person.
Yeah.
The dog he chose, well, that doggy's pretty smart.
Okay, Going Home show. Thank you for joining us. We are going to summer camp. It's true, getting ready to go. But we have a bit of a story, a bit of a journey in camps and in leadership. Andy Renton, thank you for coming on the show today. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in camp. What did that look like?
I grew up going to family camp every year, and then I started going to kids camps and went to the teen camps and went to family camps with friends' families.
And what was it? What was that made you just love going to camp?
Oh, well, for me it's about connection, it's about relationships, it's about having a community. And going to family camp was something that my family always went to the same one, and other people came to the same one, and we grew good, strong friendships with people.
Right.
And the fact that I was challenged in my faith was one aspect of it, and the fact that I grew in community was one aspect that kept me coming and allowed me. I stepped into leadership as a teenager, starting to volunteer and being at camps for whole summers to work on the work crew and stuff like that, and it was really a huge part of my faith.
When did you remember being challenged with your faith? When did that start?
Well, I became a Christian actually at camp. I remember it was an interesting story, and this is something that, going back, over the years of camp ministry, I believe this was something that was common now that isn't as common as lately. But I remember being 11 years old, and I grew up going to church, so I kind of knew the stories. And this guy, he was a speaker, and he gave me the story. All I remember is something about bears and something about fire, and I was scared. And he said, if you're scared, or this is what I remember, if you're scared, go to the back and we'll pray for you. And I went to the back, and a guy named Glenn, beautiful man, he prayed for me. And I had, grown up going to church, but that was the time when I said, God, I want you to come into my heart and come into my experience.
So you're spending time at camp, and you're just loving it. When do you come to the point where you're like, man, I want to serve. I want to be a part of this. What happens?
Well, I think for me, a big part of when I took that choice of accepting Jesus, and I knew that it was something different, and a couple people told me that. They said, this is different now. And so at the age of 11, I actually started volunteering at my church. It wasn't at camp at first. I went back to my church and I said, I need to get involved in a way of helping people. And I started volunteering, doing children's ministry stuff, helping with the 3 and 4-year-olds. When I was 14 and 15 years old, there was, my hockey teams, different things where people started acknowledging me as a leader and asking me to be the assistant captain or the captain,
right,
things like that. And I started stepping up in that way as well. And soon I was leading ministry. I was actually, wasn't just playing hockey. I was actually running a hockey program for inner city youth down in Victoria for YFC, or I took a team of teenagers into the Victoria Youth Custody Center, and alongside with other teenagers. I was a teenager, and we all went in and we volunteered there.
Why are you doing it? Like,
it was just something that, to me, I loved people. I knew that God loved me, and He was that first love, and I responded to that love, and that our job is to take that love.
What sort of support, like you're going and you're making decisions as far as where you want to go to school and what you want to do. Schooling takes time.
Yeah.
And what people are sort of, or what things are sort of saying, right, keep going with this, you're doing well, like, it's okay.
Well, a lot of people, a lot of things. Like, obviously my parents were critical throughout my whole life. They're incredibly supportive, and they've been sacrificial throughout my whole life and supporting me. A lot of friends, I have a lot of mentors that I go to. I'm a pretty transparent person. I'm honest to a fault. I kind of talk and have an open sleeve all the time, and so I have a lot of people that I go to and just lay it all out and say, what do you think? But overall, it's definitely my wife, for the last 7 years, almost 8 years, has been my biggest support, and talking about schooling, like, we put a lot of money into it, and a lot of time, where, you know, for 2 years I was working full-time as a youth pastor and going to school full-time doing my master's, and we had a daughter at that time, and she was basically a single parent, and we made that decision together that this was the time to do it before we have more kids. You know, our daughter Leilani, she is probably not going to remember what happens when she's 1 and 2 years old down the road, and if I wanted to do this, it'd be best to do it now. And so she was a single parent in many ways, but God really sustained us through all of that, and in a great way. Like, we're
now, now looking back at that,
and through it was awesome. It really was, and it's, looking back, it's miraculous. That's how we look at it. We just say, how did we get it done? How did we actually do the school and the work and the parenting? And really, it's
your response is, ain't no thing.
Yeah, so God's been the clapper, probably because He's been protecting us through it. More than anyone else, but couldn't have done it without an amazing wife, that's for sure.
Talk to us a little bit about family and ministry, and now you're executive director up at Emmeline. What is that like, being so close to camp life as a family?
Well, I met my wife at camp, and so camp's been a big part of her journey in her life. And when we met, we became friends, and one thing that we shared with each other, that we both wanted to work at camp or run a camp, and so that really helped to bring us together. And so this is something that we've decided to do together, and it's a ministry of both of ours. Though I'm the one that's at the office and doing most of the work late at night and doing that. And so it's a challenge for her to be in a remote community, but she is an integral part of our ministry. And really the cool thing that we've done is we basically have like family dinners once a week with all the staff and all their families, and with all of our students. We have a student program at Emmeline through the off season, and so we end up having, you know, all of them over. And she's learning actually how much of a gift of hospitality she has, and how it fills her up to do that, and how she can see that God works through her that way. And so she's having a great experience with it. But it is a challenge, I would say, to move a family from the city to a remote community where you don't have a lot of connection. But it's also, we love it, in between the mountains and over the waters and stuff.
So some of the things that, you know, you've really learned through this process of just being a leader up at camp, serving up at camp, what are...
I think what I've really learned is, as I was, you know, a teenager, I started going up to camp and volunteering for a month or for a whole summer, and really scrubbing toilets, doing dishes. And what I learned is that Jesus did this. He lowered himself to literally nothing. He became man, and he became the least of man. He laid himself down. He washed feet. You know, he did the lowest of jobs. And what I've realized is that there is nothing that should be too low for us. That really we should be able to do anything. And even when you're the executive director of a camp, I need to be willing, and I do, scrub toilets or wash sinks and do dishes and do those sorts of things, because it's about attitude, and it's about, you know, just being willing to do whatever is necessary. And I think through the years of volunteering, that at camp and at church, I've really learned that being a leader is being a servant. You know, being able to care for people and care for the organization, care for whatever you can for their good, not for your own.
This is our outdoor chapel. Come on in.
You've had a real profound just experience with camp at a very early age. You've probably seen a lot change over that time. What are the things that you see going on in camp?
Well, as I said, really, I was scared into, you know, accepting Jesus in some ways. I really
the bear.
believed God was looking. The bear, the fire, you know. That's been something what people know of camp. They think of, you know, fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
They think of that kind of thing. They think of rustic cabins. They think of bullying.
Yeah.
That's part of camping history that I really think is a sad part of history. You know, I had some bad experiences growing up at camp. You know, by God's grace, I kept going and I loved other aspects, so it was worth it. But some people have horrible experiences. So I think part of the camping world is moving forward into, you know, taking away those bad experiences. So that there's two different things that we do. Is one, we have a lot more care and focus and compassion and, you know, the ethical side of evangelism, you could say, where we actually care for the whole person. That wasn't maybe there from before the 80s, you know, that sort of thing. And then also just standards, that we have a lot of regulatory bodies that are over top of us now that make sure that we have all these rules in place and all this training in place that wasn't there until the 80s and 90s. And so camp is moving in that direction where we can care for people. And I really believe this is something that at Imidine, this is something that's part of our mission, is that we provide a safe place for people. And in that, we can create relationships with them, care for them, and invite them into a relationship with God. The cool thing about camp is that it does have this, it's this place to have unbelievable experiences and experience joy. And sometimes people don't want to come to camp, or they're saying, well, I'm not good with kids, and so how do I be involved? And I think back, there was a guy who came about 6 or 7 years ago, and he wasn't even a Christian. He was kind of on that journey and thinking about it and that sort of thing, and he decided to come up. He was kind of, you know, not forced into it, but, you know, slightly gently persuaded. And he ended up scrubbing pots all week. That's what he was doing, was he didn't connect with the kids. But he saw them from a distance, and really, he experienced God that week. He was able to get to know God. He was singing the songs. He was praying prayers. And he experienced God through being at, you know, he stand at the back of the chapel, actually stand outside the chapel and just watch. He didn't connect a lot, but he was able to find a role, experience God. And he went home and he kind of, you know, he got into that, and there was some ups and downs. And recently he came back to camp. Literally, he hadn't been back since that time. He'd only been there the once. Came back to camp. He stepped out of the car, literally foot hit the ground, started crying. Because he could just feel the joy that he knew he experienced there, the God that he experienced there. And he felt it again. He hadn't felt it for a long time, and he said, I need to be here. I need to get back here. How can I get back up here?
All right, so we've heard about leadership, we've talked about education and family and relationships and summer camp. Man, it's been a good time. Andy Renton, thank you for coming by. I have one last question. Andy, where are you going?
Going home.